My name is Beaudette. I'm a research soil scientist with the U.S. Department of Agriculture in the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and I work on soil survey. I grew up in Fresno, California, in the San Joaquin Valley, on the San Joaquin soil series. When I was a kid, and I would dig in the garden with my mom mostly, digging in the top 15 to 20 centimeters was pretty easy, but there would be an abrupt change from kind of a dark brownish color to a bright orange color, which was always fascinating for me. And I remember trying to dig a little bit deeper, like when we'd plant trees or bushes, something like that. You would reach a horizon that was too hard to dig through. And my mom would tell me, well, that's the hard pan. You can't dig through that. And your great-grandfather and his brothers, when they planted their fig orchard, actually, they would drill holes in it and blow it to pieces with black powder. And that was a fun thing that they used to do, and the fig trees did really well once they got through that hard pan, so that the soil would drain and the irrigation water would reach the roots. The roots would find a sandy layer underneath that. My grandparents on my mother's side actually were ranchers. They immigrated from Italy in the early 1900s, I believe, and bought a section of land north of Fresno. So it'd be back then it was very cheap, so a square mile was very affordable as long as you agreed to put it into production. And so they planted it with winter wheat and winter rye, and they would do rotations. And there's not enough rain to support a harvest every year, so it would be every other year. But they quickly found that wasn't very productive, and they switched to ranching. And my great-grandfather loved to race dogs, greyhounds. He would drive to Mexico every year and race his greyhounds. And I don't know at what point he switched from greyhounds to quarter horses. I think maybe he realized that he could raise quarter horses for local races and make more money than dryland farming. And so they converted to ranching with cattle and raising quarter horses to sell for the races. I didn't know any of them very well. Most of them passed away before I was old enough to ask any questions about it. But I would hear stories about, the way that they would use the land and where they would move the cattle. And they would move the cattle up into the mountains every summer. And later in life, I took a group of college students out to what used to be the ranch, and we dug a number of holes out there, and it was a lot of fun trying to connect the geologic setting and the landscape and landform shape to the different soils that you find out there. So you'd find the San Joaquin series with this durapan, a silica cemented horizon, up on these summit positions, and you'd find different soils on the shoulder and down at the foot slope. All of these things that I can't help myself but identify when I walk in a landscape or across a piece of land. But as a kid, I had no idea that any of that existed. So, I would spend countless hours walking through these fields with my brother when we were kids. And I had no idea anything, that the soils would change or could change, or that the shape of those landscapes was related to, thousands, nearly 160,000 years of dissection, that those landscapes were actually some of the oldest surfaces in California with some of the oldest soils. Well, the San Joaquin series is pretty neat. It's complicated. It's a complicated soil, meaning that you have, the relationship is not complicated, although digging in the San Joaquin series is not necessarily something that anybody would like. Attempting to dig through the durapan, it hurts your elbows, it hurts your wrists. Sometimes you can't even do it. But I think the morphology, so the arrangement of horizons and their physical and chemical properties and the colors, they're all pretty interesting. When my grandfather sold all of that property, and I went out there for the last time, I had something of maybe some sort of nostalgic reaction, perhaps, or somehow that land felt important. I had no direct connection to it other than that I played in the fields and walked up and down, and I had no hand in any of the ranching or farming or anything like that. It just somehow felt meaningful. in a way I couldn't really describe, but yeah, I mean, I think now I feel connection to the soil where I live or where I'm doing things. So I live in the mountains now, and the soils are a little bit more harsh. They're a little bit harder to do things with. In the first year of COVID, we had a giant garden. We grew corn, and we grew popcorn, and we grew potatoes and pumpkins and squash and all manner of things. In Sonora, California, which is almost directly east from San Francisco, but in the Sierra Nevada mountains. But just as a kind of afterthought to how I feel about that soil, I do find myself getting a little bit defensive when, say, somebody locally says, the soil here is worthless. I can't do anything with it. There's a strange, defensiveness that comes up, and I do my best to remind them that actually the soil can be very useful in certain ways. Certain amendments can make the soil, for example, suitable for growing blueberries or something like that. It takes a lot of work, but it's not worthless. It's not garbage. I don't know. It's